This is Michael Woodward, and this is jumbleThink.
T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to jumbleThink, where we interview amazing entrepreneurs about their journey of turning dreams and ideas into reality. Along the way, we're going to share some tips on how you can turn your own dreams and ideas into reality too. On today's show, we are kicking it off with talking about living your created purpose. Then later in today's show, we are talking to Mark Geiger about his journey of working in Hollywood and then moving into the world of making guitars. And then later in the show, we're also talking to Eric Severson about his adventures around the world. It's going to be a fun show. Let's jump on in. Hey there, welcome to jumbleThink. My name, of course, is Michael Woodward. I am your host. We have a very, very fun episode lined up for you today. Well, if you like this show, if you like our guests, you should go check out all of these interviews in full form, and you can go check out more than 230 more episodes simply by going on over to jumbleThink.com/podcast. That's jumbleThink.com/podcast. Today's show is being sponsored by our friends over at Penji and OpportunityInChina.com. Now, Penji is doing something really cool. They have unlimited graphic design at a low monthly rate. Think of it as your subscription to graphic design. We've been using them for a while for some of our internal projects here at jumbleThink. We love their designs. And if you sign up with them right now, as a listener of jumbleThink, they're giving 15% off your first month simply by using the code JUMBLE, JUMBLE, when you go to Penji.com. So go to Penji.com. Use that code JUMBLE, JUMBLE, and get 15% off your first month. We also want to thank our friends over at OpportunityInChina.com. Whether you want to learn or teach abroad, they are the place to go to get that support. They can help connect you with learning experiences and also teaching opportunities if you have a bachelor's degree all around the world. Head on over to OpportunityInChina.com to learn more. That's OpportunityInChina.com. Well, we are going to kick off today's show with talking about created purpose, what it means, and how you can apply it to making your dreams and ideas a reality. So let's go ahead and jump into this topic all about living your created purpose. You most likely have heard me mention this concept of created purpose, but I've never gone into detail about what I mean and why it's important. Today, we're changing that. You know, the great question to start out with is, that's great, created purpose. What does it mean? And how can I tap into it? Well, I'm glad you asked, and we're going to go a little bit deeper by making you think for a moment. I want you to ask these two questions. The first question, have you found what you're created to do, or do you feel unfulfilled and stuck? Again, have you found what you were created to do, or do you feel unfulfilled and stuck? And the second question, do you feel like you're tapping into your destiny, or do you feel like you're living without purpose? And again, that is, do you feel like you're tapping into your destiny, or do you feel like you're living without purpose? Well, if you're feeling like you have found your created purpose, what you're created to do, or what you're destined to do, you're on the right path, but you still might not understand this concept of created purpose. And if you haven't, it's so significant that you find what you're created to do and you walk in that purpose and destiny. Over the past few years, I seem to bump into these people who say something like this. I feel like I'm doing what I was created to do, or I found my passion and I'm living it out, or maybe even I'm walking in my destiny. They always seem to be joy-filled, passion-driven, and completely walking in their zone of genius. Now, that's another term you might often hear, and zone of genius is different than created purpose, but they run in the same streams. Zone of genius is a term I hear all the time. We hear it on the podcast by guests who have stopped by and been interviewed, and they talk about living and walking in your zone of genius. Let's define that because it's a great place to start as we build a foundation on created purpose. Now, zone of genius is the mental state in which you actually thrive. It's much deeper than that, but that's the basic bones of it. The whole concept comes from Gay Hendricks' book, The Big Leap. If you haven't read it, read it. If you haven't read it, check it out, and I think you're going to love it. He defines 4 different zones of function. and the last one being zone of genius. Let's talk about them. The first one is the zone of incompetence. This zone is the zone in which you are engaging in something you inherently do not understand or are not skilled at. This is not the area you want to hang out. You don't want to be an expert of the incompetence. You don't want to live here. This is bad. Strike it out. Move on. If you're there, you got to get out of there. The second zone is the zone of competence. In this zone, you are doing what you are efficient at, but recognize that many people are likewise efficient at it, thus not distinguishing you and your capabilities in any significant way. These are the things you're good at, but you're a dime a dozen. You don't stand out. You don't shine. Everyone else is playing in the same sandbox. And again, this is a good area to know, because if you're good at something and you're efficient at it, it's a foundation for zone of genius. It's a foundation for created purpose, but it's, again, not where you want to hang out. The third zone is the zone of excellence. In this zone, you are doing something that you are tremendously skilled at. Often, the zone of excellence is cultivated, it's practiced, and it's established over time. These are the things that you are excellent at because you've worked at it. You've crafted the skill. You've gotten really good at it. And this is a good place to hang out. And it can be a part of zone of genius. It can be a part of created purpose. But the zone of genius, the fourth zone of function, is in this zone, you are capitalizing on your natural abilities, which are innate rather than learned. This is a state in which you get into a flow, find ceaseless inspiration, and you seem to not only come up with work that is distinguished and unique, but it also it's a way that excels far beyond what anyone else is doing. This is your natural abilities. This is tapping into that created purpose. The zone of genius is excelling in areas that you're excellent in, but it's also tapping into the abilities that you're created and live with. Zone of genius is a great starting place, but it is not the fullness of what created purpose is. It's a great foundation. Let's break down created purpose. First, we start with created, which stems obviously from the word create, which can be defined as to bring something into existence or cause something to happen as a result of one's actions. Or it can also be of an actor originate a role by playing a character for the first time. And lastly, invest, someone with a new rank or title. These are amazing, amazing definitions of create. And let's go further. Let's define purpose. It's defined as the reason for which something is done or created or for which something exists. It can also have as one's intention or object. When you put the words together, you get something that is kind of confusing. It takes a little bit of wordsmithing and wrestling through the different definitions to come up with the perfectly crafted definition of created purpose. I think here are some examples that you might identify with. Created purpose is to bring something into existence with reason and intention. Or it could be created purpose is to find your identity, which comes from the invest on someone with a new rank or title, to find your identity and to live that out with intention and reason. Created purpose is all about finding the reason you are here on earth, the reason that you live, your intention, and the existence that you're creating by being here. Many people, their lives are defined by mediocre existences. They are not defined with fulfilled intention and reason, and so they live every day without that purpose that defines their direction forward, and they get stuck in this place of repetitive action, of being not fulfilled, of being undriven towards a destiny that they're reaching. And so when they're stuck there, they're not living their created purpose. Now, that may be you, and if it's you, we're going to change that today, or I'm going to challenge you to change that today and come into your created purpose to find that new identity, the authentic identity of who you are, and to give you reason and intention so you can move forward into the future that you should live in. This created purpose comes from, in my belief system, a God who created you with intention and reason, not to place you on earth to live an unfulfilled, mediocre, half-lived life where you sell out to lies of the American dream instead of God's dream for you, for the reason in which you are alive. And so this created purpose goes beyond Zone of Genius. Zone of Genius is tapping into the purpose of the identity God created you with so you can walk in the fullness of that created purpose and change the world around you. In my opinion, created purpose is fundamental to being a person that has ideas and dreams and makes them a reality. So what do you do from here? What do you do to find your zone of genius? And ultimately, how do you find that created purpose that you can walk in the fullness of who you are with the interaction of how you impact the world around you? So how do you find your created purpose? Unfortunately, I hate to tell you, there is no get your created purpose quickly scheme. This is a long process. It is a lifetime of intention and choices and moving forward and evolving and growing and pushing further into that dream and destiny that God has for you. But here are some steps that will help you in the process. Step number 1, slow down. We live in a society that's overconnected, driven for fast responses, expecting everything today. We are in a rush to get there. If you want to live your created purpose, you have to slow down. You cannot fast track it. You need to do the work. You need to do the time. You need to slow down so you can get there. It's that old story of the tortoise and the hare, the slow race wins. And so slow down today. Don't rush. Don't make decisions quickly. But when you have a decision, you do need to move forward. But first, you have to slow down so you can get there. Step 2, seek God and listen. I know some of you listening aren't going to resonate with this. You're going to be like, I don't believe in God, or I don't know God. I don't know what that means. I'm not a Christian. I'm not a faith person. I'm not whatever. And I'm telling you right now that you need to seek God, and He will reveal Himself to you. I remember talking to some people, and they said, we were running down this road of destruction where we were doing what the world tells us that is success. We had lots of money, fast cars, all the girls that we wanted to connect up with, we could, and all of this stuff. And they said every time we went down that road, it led us to this place of destruction. And when we stopped and slowed down and we listened to this small voice, all of a sudden it led us to purpose and intention, and we began to walk in what we were created to do. When they slowed down, when they stopped listening to the noise of the world around them and everything that they're supposed to do according to those voices, you know what they found? They found a small voice that led them to the place of perfection for their life, their created purpose. I think that voice is the voice of God speaking to them. It knew the direction that they should go. It knew the way that they should go, and you need to listen to that voice. You need to find that voice, and you need to quiet yourself and listen. Step 3, evaluate your life and giftings. You got to cut some stuff. You got to throw out the old stuff. Get it in the trash. Get it out of where it is. Get rid of the clutter of your the things in your life that are holding you back from this created purpose. Get rid of it. Get rid of it all, and begin to take stock of what matters for you. What are your values? What are the things that drive you? What are the relationships that bring you life? Evaluate those things, put energy in those things, and cut the rest out. Get rid of the noise, get rid of the junk, get rid of the clutter, and simplify your life. And the second part of that is to find your gifting. Start taking stock. What are you good at? What are you naturally bent to do? What are the things that people look at you and they go, oh, he can do that? And it's not work for you, but it literally is just something easy that you can do. Find those things that are those gifts that you have that make you so uniquely you. And then figure out how those fit into that purpose and destiny. You may have a gift for friendship in which people come to you and they want to get your advice. They want you to help them. They want you to push them in the right direction. And you might love doing that. And that's part of the things that just fuels you. And you may have a calling, a purpose to be a counselor or to be a pastor or to be a person that invites so many into their life to process those deep things of life. On the flip side, you may be really good with your hands and mechanical, and you can fix anything, whether it's a car or a watch or a clock, and you can craft and create, and your giftings are bent to that's just natural and you love doing it. You long for the moments to be in your garage working on that special car project or in your wood shop crafting the next chair or whatever it is that you want to craft. Or maybe you are really good with words and writing and crafting a story, and yet you never write because you are being held back by the clutter and the noise of obligation, of work, of the things that hold you back. And so step 3 is evaluate your life and your gifting. Step 4, be intentional. This could go much earlier in the process, but I put it here because as you go through this, you have to be intentional to continue the journey. You have to keep going. It is a relentless pursuit of pushing into your dreams and destinies. Things will always pull you away from your created purpose. They will hold you back from it, whether it be something that you think is an obligation that you have to do or something that you think is fun to do. Those things will rob you of moving forward. Every day you have to wake up and choose to be intentional. You have to choose to have an intent in which you're going towards, a direction in which you're moving forward, and you have to keep on going and keep on going and keep on going. You have to be intentional in this journey. Step number 5. All right, face the fear and make your move. The journey of created purpose is often held back by those who won't step into the unknown and face the fear of, well, the unknown or of failure or of disappointment. And they never make their move, and they always stay in the place of comfort, in the place of safe, in the place of mediocrity, because they never make their move, face the fear, attack it head on, and move into that purpose, that created purpose. And because they don't do that, they never arrive at the place that they were designed to be at. Number 6, play big, but play for the long game. You know, it's easy to play big and burn out. This is the whole hustle lie. This is all the grind lie that I've talked about. Don't hustle, don't grind, but play big and play for the long game. Play for this is the direction. It's it's a long journey in the same direction. You're keeping on going. You're keeping on moving forward. Keep on a sustainable journey so that you can move towards this created purpose. Step 1, slow down. Step 2, seek God and listen. Step 3, evaluate your life and gifting. Step 4, be intentional. Step 5, face fear and make your move. And step 6, play big, but play for the long game. Now, there was one step that isn't a step, but it's a word of advice to help you on this journey. Do not do it alone. If you do it alone, you're going to burn out. If you do it alone, you're going to get lost in the weeds of obligation, of the things you have to do. You're not going to have clarity sometimes. You need that friend on your journey. Isolation is your enemy. Isolation will let you get stuck in your head and marinate on the fears, marinate on the voices that tell you not to do it. So don't stay there. Get into a place of community. Get into a place of relationship with a mentor, a coach, a mastermind, with a community of dreamers, with a family of people that are pushing you towards the created purpose in which you were designed to live. It's so important. And it's not necessarily a step, but it will be a sustaining factor through this journey of finding created purpose. As we wrap up today's episode, I want you to go back to those original questions. Those questions of, have you found what you were created to do, or do you feel unfulfilled and stuck? And the second question, do you feel like you're tapping into your destiny or that you're living without a purpose? I want you to answer those. Truly answer those for yourself. And I want to challenge you, if you are feeling unfulfilled and stuck, or if you feel like you're living without purpose, without a direction to move forward, you got to make a change. And today is a great time to make that change. Today is a great day to say, you know what? I'm sick of living the life that others tell me I need to live. I'm sick of buying into this American dream that says, if I have the big house, the fast car, and the perfect family, then life is perfect. Those things don't fulfill. Those things are great things to have along the journey. Having an awesome house is awesome. Having a fast car is really cool. Having a great family, no matter the situation, is optimal. You must have that. But the reality is you don't need a picture perfect family. You need the right family. You need the right dream. You need to find your created purpose. It's your turn. What do you do next? Are you going to step up? Are you going to make the move? Are you going to push forward and find that created purpose? I think it's time for you. If you're listening to this and this is speaking to you, I think it's your time to step into that destiny, to find that dream, to find that purpose, to find that created purpose and step into it. Make that commitment for today. Make that commitment for tomorrow. Make that commitment for 10 years from now. Make that commitment so that it is a lifelong endeavor. Evolve and grow and change and develop into the created person you are. Find who that person is. Find the things that drive you forward and begin to create a life of created purpose. I hope that's encouraged you on your journey of chasing your own dreams and ideas. In a moment, we'll be back to talk to Mark Geiger. Today's show is sponsored by our friends over at Penji. Here is a little bit more about them. Penji helps startups, agencies, and marketing teams achieve more with unlimited graphic design support at a flat monthly rate. Their easy-to-use online platform pairs you with a professional designer and lets you create as many design projects as you want. Think of it as your monthly subscription to top-notch design. No contracts, no hourly billing, just fast, simple, and affordable graphic design for all of your needs. Use the code JUMBLE, JUMBLE, to get 15% off your first month of Penji. So head on over to Penji, PENJI.com, and use the code JUMBLE to get 15% off your month. I know I love their service, and I think you will too. There is a lot going on at jumbleThink. We want you to stay in the loop. Head on over to jumbleThink.com where you can sign up for our newsletter and find links to our social channels like Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. We'd love to connect with you and dream big together so that we can change the world with the dreams we were created to do. Now let's jump back into today's episode. I am super excited to bring you this clip from Season 2, Episode 77 with our friend Mark Geiger. Mark has spent years building things from Hollywood sets to custom guitars. He decided to leave his job at Paramount and start building guitars full-time as a custom guitar maker, also known as a luthier. Along the way, he found a passion to teach others how to master the craft of guitar making too. So let's join the conversation we had with Mark Geiger. Mark, thanks so much for taking time and being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I was just sharing here that you've done a lot of different things in your journey, a lot of it around construction and building and making things. Where did that passion for building start?
Well, I think most of that comes from my dad. He was into construction for quite a while, and he's had a lot of different careers. So I think probably the genes came from there, and I've always been interested in building things. If I wasn't building guitars, it'd be something else.
Wow. And your story is kind of fun because you, like so many luthiers of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, you were a kid who wanted a guitar, couldn't afford it, said, maybe I can build this on my own. Tell us that story.
Well, it was actually, I think it was my senior year in high school, and I wanted a Les Paul. And
Yeah.
there was one at a local shop, and I saved up all summer for it. And when I got there, they had just sold it. So
Wow.
I thought, well, let's try building one. And, I caught a lot of grief along the way. And it certainly wasn't a museum piece, but it did play. And I got another friend of mine who was a phenomenal guitar player in a local band, and he liked it enough to commission me to do one for him. And so that's how it got started.
Wow. So it was out of just kind of life situations. You kind of saw a problem, came up with a solution, and solved it. You obviously are now doing lutherie and teaching, which for some people they might not know what that is. Tell us what lutherie is and what your job is, what you do.
Well, it lutherie is the building of stringed instruments.
Okay.
So literally, it started from lutes. You can even call violin makers luthiers. I specialize in acoustic and electric guitars, but I also I've done dulcimers and a mandolin, what else? Banjo and a couple ukuleles. So it kind of it spans the gamut of any kind of stringed instrument. And what I basically do are acoustic instruments with some electrics on the side.
Okay. And I've played your instruments. I was just reminiscing about a story of when I first met you. I remember it was Healdsburg Guitar Show, and I was early in the stage. I'm still early in the stage. I'm 50% through, and that must have been like 10 years ago, building my first acoustic guitar. I just need to just step up and go take your course, get from the East Coast out there to see you and have you hold me to the fire. But I remember sitting down, and a lot of the guitar makers back in the 10 years ago, they made beautiful guitars. You make incredibly beautiful guitars, and what drew me to you was the comfort of the neck playing, the neck shape, and everything that you had done. And I just sat there for about an hour just playing their various guitars. I think you had like 5 or 6 sitting there,
Yeah.
and it was a lot of fun. It was also one of the first times I think I had seen and heard about baritone guitars, which was kind of opened my eyes to innovation. So for you, when you're approaching what you do, when you're approaching building, how are you thinking about the process of building and how you build a guitar?
Well, what I like to do, I've never wanted to approach it from a corporate level. I never wanted to be Bob Taylor or Paul Reed Smith,
Yeah.
these guys who are big commercial builders. And so what I try to do is try to do something different every time and not repeat myself. And
Okay.
that sort of keeps the inspiration going. If I was building the same instrument over and over and over again, I probably still wouldn't be building.
Wow. Wow, that's really, really cool. Okay, so I want to go back a little bit in this first segment and go back to you end up working at Paramount on the construction sites, which is a cool thing to be able to say. Not many people that I know have said, hey, I worked at Paramount building sets. Tell us a little bit about that journey of how you got into that space and doing that.
Well, I always wanted to work in film, and
Okay.
I believe it was about 85, I applied to Ithaca College for their film program. And so I have a Bachelor of Science in film. And that's always intrigued me. So when I went out to Los Angeles with a couple of friends of mine, of course you want to be the next Steven Spielberg or whatever.
Right.
And of course you have to eat. And my background was in construction. And I talked to a guy who said, you should call so-and-so. They're going to be doing a film that's non-union called The Addams Family, and they're probably going to go union.
Wow.
And so I got on the project, and I worked on that for about 6 months. And after the first month, we got grandfathered into the union. And after I took my tests and paid my dues, that's how I got into that. And it was good for paying the bills. And it was very interesting. We do everything from once I started working for Paramount proper, because a lot of it was freelance before that.
Right.
And once I got into that, we could do all sorts of really oddball things. I remember one of the things I did, we were doing Naked Gun 33 1/3, and Priscilla Presley was supposed to be on this Mack truck, and she's tiny, so we're supposed to have this like outrageous, truck. And I had to build a Mack truck steering wheel that was 3 times bigger than a real Mack truck steering wheel. So you're doing stuff like that. And then, of course, there's all the Star Trek projects and everything on Star Trek. There's no right angles. And so that was a lot of fun. So you do a lot of interesting things. And all these things sort of helped in the Luthery part of it, too, because it's problem solving.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that because it seems like the more I talk to you, the more I realize that one of your passions is being able to use your brain and process problems and come up with solutions. Whereas some other people, they just like the routine of doing the same thing over and over again. It just sounds like part of your story is you love being able to see a problem, find a unique solution, and solve it in a creative way.
Yeah, it's kind of fun.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the pivot. You spent years working at Paramount. All of a sudden, well, probably not all of a sudden, it was a journey for you, I'm sure. You decide, hey, I'm going to give it a shot and go full time and just do guitar making and make that my career.
Well, I think you reach a certain point. I was at a level where I was foreman, and I didn't really want to go much higher than that. You get into the politics. I was already getting into the politics. Plus, you get older, and some of these films we'd work on, say we were working on a film that we may be working 3 months with no days off, 12 hours a day. So it'd be 7 days a week, and it's kind of a young man's game. So you get older, and stuff like that becomes a lot tougher to do.
How are you finding purpose in what you do, whether it's teaching what you teach on guitar making or whether it's actually building? How are you finding purpose in that?
Well, I like both of them. I like building because there are 3 factors that have to it has to play well, for one thing. It has to sound good. And then on the next level, it has to be able to withstand a certain amount of abuse for quite a few years. And so I like the idea of I liken it to like a Ferrari. You're talking about a really build that is just on the level of collapsing, but not. So you're trying to maintain that sort of hyper I don't know how you'd say it, but this ability to have this great sound, but you want to be able to have it so that it's going to be there for 100 years.
Yeah.
So that's the part that's fun. And on the teaching level, I've always sort of been interested in it. I've been doing that for about 10 years. And the thing I like about that is we start out with a box of wood, and say, for instance, an acoustic class is about 2 weeks. It's 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And we're working 8 hours for 6 days a week. And the beauty of that is I watch these guys look at this box of wood, and it literally is a box of wood. There's no built parts in it. And I watch them, and their eyes are like going, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? And you watch that transition from that beginning to the last day when they're stringing this up and playing it, and that just marvelous look on their face that like, I built this. Because I think part of the problem that I see actually nowadays, it's from an old man, I guess, it's perspective, but nobody builds anything.
Yeah.
And that's nothing against somebody who makes their living mentally. But I also think that there's this aspect that you have to sort of get your hands dirty. You got to have the same sort of energy in your hands as you do in your head. And so if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Especially with being a younger generation guy. I mean, I'm 37, so I'm not super young, but
you're pretty.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of that generational shift and mindset change. And it's one of the things I'm excited about is I'm seeing more and more younger guys saying, yeah, maybe I could do something that is a little bit more physical,
sure.
Whether it's coffee roasting, that's blowing up real big everywhere. And there's a lot of like younger luthiers coming out really saying, hey, I think this is something that I can do. And so it's really cool to see what you're able to do with teaching people who maybe haven't been able to make something or just didn't think they could do it.
Sometimes I find that the people who have no experience are the ones who do the best job because they listen to what you're trying to do instead of having these preconceived notions and stuff.
So good. So good. Now, what is one challenge you're currently working to overcome in your business?
I think the main thing I have to overcome is I don't want to get stagnant. And when I find myself thinking, well, I'm doing the similar thing, it may not be the same thing. And so what I do is I try to keep these projects going. I just finished one that I started about 6 or 7 years ago and just kind of puttered with. And it's an Art Nouveau style carved electric guitar with through carvings and all this, which took me a while to do. And it was actually in a gallery exhibit a couple of months ago in Tracy, California. That's the kind of stuff that sort of motivates you to like keep going because you're trying to push your own boundaries. Somebody may not want to pay for that.
Yeah. But sometimes you've got to balance that of like what's business sense and what's sometimes a growth expanse space where you're growing and evolving as a builder or as a maker in that space. For you, you've just wrapped up this kind of longer project where you've been puttering over it for the last several years. What's maybe a next big goal you have for your business or for what you want to do?
Well, that's funny you should say that. I'm kind of at a crossroads right now where I'm trying to decide which direction I'm going to go, whether I'm going to sort of start winding down actually, because of the fact, and this has nothing to do with the creative process, it has more to do with insurance and stuff like that. I'm finding it harder and harder to find insurance companies that will insure me to do the building classes and stuff like that. So wow. That's one of those things that's very tough, and that's a logistical issue. It's kind of like next year I've got to find another carrier, so wow. I'll be able to do that. So that's probably my biggest challenge right now.
One of the real unique things about artisan luthiers versus the big box Taylor, Martin, Gibson, and there's nothing wrong with Taylors or Martins or Gibson. They're just a different thing. You get to collaborate in the building process. Yes, you are the artist in what you're building. You are the craftsman, but you're able to work and collaborate with your customer, whereas that's very rare to happen with a Taylor guitar or your it's just not worth it usually at that level to work with Taylor. So tell us a little bit about your approach for being able to work one-on-one and how that collaboration looks when somebody comes in and says, sure. Hey, I want you to build a guitar.
Well, what I like to do is I like to find out what they're playing at the time. So, and normally, it's one of those things. You never talk anybody into buying one of these. Yeah. Usually what happens is they played them before. Yeah. And they liked either the sound or the playability or whatever. You're never going to let go hard sell any of this stuff. Yeah. And so what I try to do is I try to sit down with them, find out what their style is, how they like to play, listen to them play too, which is a good thing. And what I usually do, they'll usually have some pretty good ideas of what they want. I just finished an instrument for a woman. We did it out of Macassar ebony, which is just a stunning piece of wood. And she was a big fan of a certain flower she grew up with. And so that's what we did for an inlay. So it's a question of woods, matching the woods together. So the top wood is usually spruce, matching that with the back to try to get a sound she's interested in that case, and that sort of thing. And then after we get that basic stuff done, then it's all the little details. What color purflings do you want? What sorts of little odds and ends do you like? Do you want inlays on the fretboard? Do you want it black? Do you want what kind of scale is going to be? Which is pretty important too. The longer the scale, usually, the more fingerstyle players like it. But if you've got small hands, that may not work for you. So you kind of deal with it in that respect. So the cool part about it is actually going through the process. And at the end of the thing, what I do is I always document everything. And at the end, when the person takes the delivery of it, I usually have a book. Okay. So they can go through the book and look through, how I built it and how their particular instrument was built.
There is a lot more to this conversation. To check that out, head on over to jumbleThink.com/podcast, click on that button for season 2, and look for Mark Geiger. In a moment, we'll be back with Eric Severson to talk about a lifestyle of adventure. Today's show is sponsored by our friends over at OpportunityInChina.com. Have you been looking for a way to change your career or social prospect? Do you see the world around you changing and haven't quite figured out what path you should take? You are not alone in seeking opportunity. Visit OpportunityInChina.com for access to scholarships to attend university in China. Or, if you have a bachelor's degree already, OpportunityInChina.com provides access to jobs in the educational sector all across China. Now, working in China is not only often well paid, but it will place you among 1/5 of the world's population, boosting your social network and bringing you more deeply into the story of globalization. This will open up doors you never knew existed. So seize your opportunity now. Visit their website for more information at OpportunityInChina.com. Now let's join our conversation with Eric Severson.
Mettre l'aiguille sur le disque. Mettez le contact. Reposez votre bras.
We are back to talk to Eric Severson. Eric has traveled to over 80 countries around the world in 49 of the 50 states in the United States of America. And he's lived in France, Japan, Thailand, French Guinea, Washington State, Virginia, Alaska, California. We are talking about the lifestyle of adventure, and I can't think of many people who have lived a much more adventurous life than Eric. So let's jump into this conversation. Eric, thanks so much for being on the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's one of those days where, you just check the things off the list, and so far I've gotten a lot done, so I'm happy about today so far.
Those are always the best days. You just feel like everything in the world is okay, and your list isn't getting longer, and you're moving forward with life. It's a good day when that happens.
Exactly. This was one of those times when I was almost done with 15 things and done with none. And now, halfway through the day, I'm done with about half of them. So that's great.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. You have, every once in a while we get someone on the podcast that is an adventurer, a true adventurer. And I would have to say that you would fit that bill.
I'd have to agree. It's been a fun ride so far.
So you spent years teaching English all throughout the world, Japan, France, Thailand, all throughout the United States. Tell us a little bit about how you got the travel bug and how you got into being this adventurer that you are.
So the bug kind of happened when I was 17 years old, just 17, and I wanted to ride my bike between my junior and senior year of high school from Tacoma, Washington to Los Angeles.
Okay.
And so I got a friend of mine who was a little older. He was in the Marines and named Yogi, and he decided, hey, I want to do this too. So we got our bicycles, and I had this old clunky bike, and we started heading south. And,
wow.
And he got called into the Marines he was in the reserves, and so he had to leave halfway through the trip. So I'm 17 years old on a pedal bike, traveling day and night by myself, and I really loved it. It was just seeing the country go by at the pace of a pedal bike, meeting people because I was alone. That was kind of the spark that really made me love travel. And then internationally, after I graduated from high school, my grandmother wanted me to go to Norway with her and the whole family went to meet the relatives, because she came over from Norway. I was born here in the States, but I wanted to meet my relatives in Norway. And after I met the family in Norway, I took off and just kind of tromped around Europe for a bit, and it just kept going. From that point, it was just following opportunities. And I think there are opportunities for everybody all over the place. I was one of the ones that didn't shy away even when it wasn't logical.
Now, did this completely drive your parents nuts? Here you are taking a bicycle from the Pacific Northwest down to LA, and then you start on these adventures and you're always going. And how did they perceive that?
They were really good about, as long as I was making what they considered to be good decisions, responsible decisions, they gave me a lot of freedom. And when I messed up a few times, they were really quick to reel me in. One of the most powerful things that my mom said to me when I was a middle teenager was I did something she didn't like, and I can look back and I can see why she didn't like it. And she said, Eric, you have built over the years a wedge of trust, a circle of trust. And she says, I got to be honest, you've put a wedge in that circle of trust, and it's going to take some time to build that back for me.
Wow.
And so, and that made me really know that I'm responsible for my actions. And it did. It took some time to repair that trust with my parents, and I did, and it's been great. The hardest one for them was Africa. I was 19 when I decided I wanted to go see what it was all about in Africa, and I was just 20 when it finally happened, and nobody helped me on this. I literally mowed lawns day and into the evenings for months and months and months to raise enough money to pay my own way to get to Africa. And I hitchhiked from London to Zaire, spending less than $50 a month.
Wow, that's crazy. That's really crazy.
Yep. And Zaire is a funny name. Now it's, of course, the Democratic Republic of Congo. Back then it was Zaire.
Yeah. Now, you talked about following opportunities as you were going on your journey. And there's one of my favorite quotes is by a guy named Leonard Ravenhill. And he said, the opportunity of a lifetime must be seized in the lifetime of the opportunity. Where did you get this tenacity to just go for it and take the steps of faith or leaps of uncertainty into the world around you?
Part of it is because a few people said I couldn't do something. And, you've heard some people say that before. Somebody said I couldn't do it, so I wanted to prove them wrong, so I did it.
Yeah.
It wasn't like that for me. But I'm going to go share two examples when people said it was impossible. One was when I was 13 and I decided I wanted to play ice hockey. And everybody in the Northwest who played ice hockey in the league I wanted to be in had been playing since 6 or 8 years old.
Yeah.
So I taught myself how to skate, and it took me a year or 18 months to skate good enough to make the team. And I did it. And when everybody said they laughed at me for going to the public skating at, Sprinker Ice Rink every Wednesday and Sunday and Thursday to learn how to play ice hockey. But I did it. And another bigger one was my high school. I was a poor student going up in grade school and middle school and things. And my junior year, something clicked, and I decided, you know what, I want to do something big. And I started studying. I went from a C- to an A average and really enjoyed it. But my senior year now, I'm having my consultation with the school counselor about where I want to go to school or what I want to do with my life. And I said, I want to go to UCLA. And she leaned over, pushes herself back from the desk and says, you'll never get into a school like that.
Wow. Closes
her notebook, and that was the end of my meeting, 90 seconds.
Wow.
So I didn't have to prove anything to this woman, whom I still, I still think of her with not happy thoughts.
Yeah.
But I didn't prove anything to her, but I still had my same goal, which was get to UCLA. Went to a community college, went to Green River Community College for 2 years, loved it. Got A's, did some other things while I was there, and got into UCLA 2 years later. So I realized that no matter what people said, I could reach my goals. I didn't want to lose focus just because other people didn't think it was possible.
You have lived this life of adventure, and I've looked through and your bio, and it's like a where's where of where Eric went and what he did and everything like that. You've really created this lifestyle of adventure. How do you approach adversity? How do you approach the unknown and really have all of how do you make those decisions of how you're going to move forward and embrace the opportunities that are going in front of you?
You know what, Michael? You have just actually taught me something about my journey, because you said something about how do I embrace the unknown or something like that. And as you said it, I kind of got goosebumps. I realized that by putting myself into situations of uncertainty, that nervousness that would come up. For example, in Africa, I walked large portions, like hundreds of miles in a row sometimes, or not 100 miles in a row. And sometimes I'd be walking into a village. They don't know who I am, and it's maybe evening, getting dark, and I'm walking into a village of maybe 150 people, and I don't know where I'm going to sleep that night. I don't know how they're going to treat me. But doing that repeatedly over and over, going into the unknown, kind of allowed me to realize that, you know what? as long as I put my best foot forward, smile at people, good things generally happen. And there were some super scary things that happened. I had somebody pull a knife the size of a machete out on me.
Wow.
I seriously, to this day, believe he was going to kill me for my stuff. And I pulled a knife back out on him. And we stood there staring at each other from 20 feet away. And he decided it wasn't worth it. My stuff wasn't worth him maybe getting stabbed himself. So
Wow.
Everything wasn't perfect. But that going into the uncertainty over and over made me realize that nervousness that you feel going into the unknown can be translated into really, really positive energy.
What is one story of like the craziest thing, the most intense thing that you just look back and it makes you smile?
So one of them is when I lived with the Indians in South America, the Wayana Indians.
Okay.
And so one of them there is, because I had a different one kind of in mind as you started the question, but when you said makes you smile, I'm going to this one. So I show up in the middle of the forest all alone. I'm doing research. Now I'm a graduate student at the University of Virginia, and I made a proposal to go down to study the Wayana Indians in South America, French Guiana, the northeast Brazil area. So I get a ride up in to live with the Indians from a doctor, and this is all territory that's blocked off that you cannot enter.
Wow.
It's protected for the Indians to protect them from disease and from exploitation from the outside. So I have my shots record is literally, a page and a half, 2 pages long of different shots and vaccinations I've had that are unusual. So anyway, I got permission to go in. A doctor goes in to give medical treatment to the Indians once a month. He goes about 3 days into the forest on top of the 2 weeks we're already in where he lives so anyway, so he drops me off with this tribe, asks if I can live with them. They say yes. That night I met some guy who said I could hang my hammock at his little hut. The next morning I wake up and I was going to be there for 3 months. I brought 7 pairs of boxer shorts and I thought that would suffice perfectly. I wake up the next morning and I see 6 Indians wearing boxer shorts. Yeah. And I've still got one on. So that's all I got. They wore him for a few days and then kind of disappeared. So I literally had 1 pair of boxer shorts for 3 months.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. And leadership with the Indians is something actually that I learned. The Wayana are very egalitarian. Okay. There's no official authority, even by the chief.
Wow.
So the chief, if he thinks something should happen, he does it by action, not by telling people they should do this and this and this. I heard stories that the chiefs in the past, and this isn't a long distant past, this is, not too long ago, that if they thought they should go to war with a neighboring tribe, he would pick up his bow and arrow and walk towards them. If people thought it was a good idea, they'd pick up theirs and follow him. If not, he would go and die alone.
Wow.
Examples I did see with my own eyes are the chief would sometimes all of a sudden wake up. We eat a few things in the morning. He would pick up a hoe and go out and start hoeing their little slash and burn garden. And other people would realize, hey, that's a great idea. So they'd pick up theirs and go start doing the same thing. And so it was a really good thing. And I've seen that now in business where I've seen leaders bark orders and get no results. And I've seen leaders speak very softly and lead by example and get tremendous results.
That's really cool. It's a great lesson of leadership that you learned in a very unique place.
Yeah, exactly.
In your adventures, in your travels, I've got to stop and ask the question that everyone I'm sure wants to know. What was the place that you just loved the most? What was the place that you would go back to over and over again if you could?
All right. So as you said it, Thailand and
Thailand.
France both popped into my head, and my answer is going to be Paris.
Okay.
Yeah. I stayed there. I probably have spent about a year there in my lifetime, but my longest one stretch was 7 months. And I was, I think, 23 years old. I'm living in this maid's quarters of this building about 3 blocks from the Eiffel Tower. So it's a little tiny cramped space that was big enough for a tiny bed, corner kitchen, and that's about it. But it was a really neat time of intellectual exploration for me. I had some very interesting, through a friend of a friend, I met a really good guy named Sofiane Jadri who lived in Paris at the time. He was my age. And it was just a really neat time of living the myth of Paris.
Okay.
Sitting on the left bank with a coffee in my hand, pretending I'm Jean-Paul Sartre or Hemingway. And then there's a reality of Paris, I think, which is, it rains quite a bit. There's too much poodle droppings on the sidewalk sometimes, and people are arrogant and rude sometimes. Every light's a red light, if in a pessimistic way, so to speak. But there's also the myth of Paris, which is just this beautiful art scene, beautiful fashion scene. I love being there in spring and just watching the fashion evolve from tweed overcoats to mini skirts, and it was just beautiful. So Paris is the one that is my favorite place in the world.
That's really cool. You studied anthropology, is that right?
Correct.
You mentioned that when you were in high school, you're meeting with your counselor, and the counselor's like, this guy's nuts. I'm closing the book. I'm out. Meeting over. How do you go against the expectations of others or against the trends of what people are doing and really start to map out your own?
That's a great question. And I do find myself sometimes being caught up into doing things and thinking, are people going to think I'm awesome for doing this? Are people going to think I'm dumb for doing this? So yeah, I do get caught up into that sometimes. And then usually when I do get caught up into realizing that I'm doing something, not necessarily because I think it's the best thing that I want to do, but because it will make me appear one way or another to other people, I usually catch myself before I get too far. I take a deep breath and I rewrite down my goals, talking to myself only.
Yeah.
And I say, what do I need to accomplish to get to this result, which is a personal result? And it usually weeds out all of the chatter outside of where I want to go.
Well, I think that leads to another good question, which is, what is your metric for success? What does success mean to you?
That's a great one. Man, Michael, you're full of good ones. I like it. So right now, I consider myself a very successful person because of this. Not every night, almost every single night when I'm going to sleep, I can't wait to wake up the next morning to do the things I do. And part of that, I've got a full-time job in a company, and I enjoy that job. I've got a business on my own, which takes a lot of time, and I enjoy that. I coach people, and I enjoy that. Every single day, almost. I'm excited to wake up the next morning, and it's not just a selfish excitement for myself at this point, because I am married and I've got 2 kids that are 11 and 13, and I'm excited for the things that they're involved in and sharing their experiences. So I think that's a big part of it. I think money is important. I like to be able to have money to do things that I want to do. It's certainly for me not the most important. One of my favorite kind of like tidbits of information I got somewhere along the way was that evidently was it the big museum just in Los Angeles, the Getty Center. So yeah. John Paul Getty, evidently he used to write letters to his nephew, who was kind of a vagabond, and he would sign his letters from the richest person in the world to the wealthiest person in the world.
Oh, wow.
And I thought that was so awesome.
You can tell in your voice that you are filled with passion and probably purpose too. How have passion and purpose been a guiding light for you? And what does it mean and look like to live with a life filled with purpose and passion?
That's another awesome one. I wrote a whole book. It's called Extraordinary to Ordinary, and it's 42 narratives about my life. And I shared a few things that happen in that. There's another one with a machine gun in my mouth. There's boxing in Thailand. So 42 narratives about things in my life. So I thought this is the most coolest thing since sliced bread. So one of my editors, the first thing he said was, and I'm like, what do you mean? And he goes, Eric, you're not done with this book. And so he said, you need to figure out the message, because people seeing your stories is really, really cool. However, what's kind of like the message? What did you learn from all of this? So I read based on a recommendation from a friend, a book called The Power of Meaning by Emily Esfahani Smith, I think is her name. And that book says that basically there are 4 pillars of meaning, and belonging is one, storytelling is another, transcendence is another, and purpose is another, and how these things are actually more important than happiness.
There is much more to this episode. Go check out Season 1, Episode 83. You can check that out at jumbleThink.com/podcast. Next week on JumbleThink, we have some great guests. We have Kathy Hanoun. She is the CEO of Dandelion. They are reinventing geothermal energy. And then later in the week, we are talking about the art of simplicity in entrepreneurship. It's going to be a lot of fun, so make sure to tune back in right here on this station. Thanks for tuning into today's show. Now it's your turn. Go out there, dream big, and change the world around you.
En avant, en arrière, sur les côtés. Vous êtes une autre personne. Les mères de famille, les enfants, peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant. Dans quelques mois, lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps, vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.